Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football and taking a look at the NFC West. What are the other teams, our arch rivals, doing in our own division, and how do we stack up? So we're going to take a look at each team, additions, subtractions for the year, how they did in the draft, kind of compare it to our own roster and how we feel about where the Seahawks are positioned. And at the end of the conversation, we'll have a better idea. We kind of did this because we started a conversation in our last show about strength of schedule and how we think that we're going to finish. And it all starts with the division. And then we really hadn't spent any time looking at these teams yet this offseason to kind of compare to. So that's what we did this week to prep for this show. Welcome in, Keith. Looking forward to the conversation, man.
Yeah, this will be a fun show, I think. A lot to talk about, a lot of details. We get a chance to, break down these teams and get a feel for exactly what they did. And maybe make some sense out of some of the weird nonsense that came out this week, like the 49ers being favored in 15 of their 17 games, while Seattle is only favored in 7.
That was crazy. Yeah.
Right?
I just thought that was just nuts. Like, how is that even possible? A team that won 6 games last year. Now, granted, yeah, they went through some things. Okay, great. And they could bounce, sure. But
they also hemorrhaged a bunch of talent this offseason. So
yeah, there's a lot of predictions out there with them winning the division or being second, and winning anywhere from 10 to 12 games, while the Seahawks are projected to win anywhere from 5 to 9. I mean, I don't know. I'm not seeing it. And now, if it turns out that way in by the end of December, I'll eat my words for sure. But from where I'm sitting right now, I'm not seeing it. But let's do this, Keith. Let's start with the Cardinals. Let's kind of go in the order we expect the teams to finish. And the Cardinals are here not because they're a bad team. It's just going to be a really solid division. Now, say what you want about the 49ers, and we just kind of did. It doesn't mean that they're a bad team. I think when healthy and everyone plays, and some of their draft picks that they had kind of come into fruition and so forth in the second half of the season, this could very well be a 10-win team. And the Cardinals could be a 10, 11-win team.
Yeah,
but somebody's got to finish last.
Of the division. They were in control of the division early on last year. And then Seattle caught them and they fell off a cliff. Only to have the Rams catch Seattle later and end up winning the whole thing. But early in the season, as the
Rams have won 9 out of 10 games to finish the season.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. Crazy.
But Arizona started off the year hot, as they tend to do, and then can't maintain it for very long. And we'll see what happens this year as far as them being able to do that. But when they start the year hot, it's because there is talent there. And so it's just a matter of, can they put stuff together? I don't know. We'll see. As far as like them improving the team, I was going through the lists of free agents and stuff and looking at the guys that they added. And I honestly am not real impressed with any talent that they've added during free agency. But that's fine. Sometimes it's all about salary cap management. It really comes down to what they did in the draft. And I think they did really well in the draft. So, but let's start with free agency. What do you think was their biggest acquisition?
Interesting. Probably Dalvin Tomlinson, I think.
Yeah.
A guy that mans the middle. They really like to play defense. They're kind of known for having some offensive explosion and lagging a little bit on the defense. And there are some gaps on this defense. But up front, I like them. Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, Darius Robinson, a draft pick from last year, Baron Browning. They've got some other guys, Zaven Collins. They drafted Jordan Birch. There's some players here to work with. It's not a bad defense. It just doesn't have a lot of depth, and there are some gaps, especially in the secondary, I think. Although they did draft Will Johnson, and we can talk about that a little bit. They drafted Walter Nolan. I mean, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. You wanted to talk about free agency, but to me, it kind of all goes together on the offensive side. I didn't think that they really improved too much. They signed Evan Brown, who we've seen play before. That's to bolster their offensive line. DJ Dallas was acquired. Yes. Yeah. Right.
There's a lot of Seahawks cast-offs on that roster. LJ Collier is re-signed with them yet again. And he played 50% of the snaps, 34% last year, which is crazy given his track record. It's interesting. Like I said, there's a lot of Jake Curran is on that roster, the old right tackle.
Yeah, it's not a bad. So their offensive wide receiver room is pretty decent. I would say it's close to being the best or second best in the division. Overall, Zay Jones, Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson. I like that trio. I really do. They've got a few pieces behind that. Trey McBride at tight end, Elijah Higgins and Tip Raymond there as well. Kyler Murray, obviously. I like Connor Williams. Trey Benson's behind that. DJ Dallas signed with them this year. They've got some depth there. It really just comes down to Kyler Murray for me. And we talked about this the other day. This team really does go as he goes. And he's got stretches and certain teams and certain defenses that he plays well against and others he does not. Like Seattle, for example. He just doesn't play well against Seattle, which is great for us. But I think that doesn't bode well for them as a kind of a potential playoff team, because I think Seattle's kind of built as a playoff team and not so much as a regular season team. Now they could prove me wrong on that, but when you play a really solid defense, as Seattle will bring to the table, that's kind of a playoff football, so everything's kind of getting ready for that. On the other side with the Cardinals, I like their head coach and stuff, but until they prove that he's steering them in a different direction and they can really kind of put it all together at the end of the season, to me, it's just the same old Cardinals. And I'm just waiting for the day in the season where they kind of fold a little bit.
Yeah, because they tend to every year, which is got to be frustrating for their fans because they get out to all these quick starts and then just fall apart. And
what do you attribute that to? Because it's gone, more than 2 or 3 different head coaches. Yeah.
I mean, early on, like when they started this, I really thought that this was a Cliff Kingsbury thing, and it was just not knowing how to maintain and keep the focus on things and just letting things get too loose. But yeah, I mean, now it's been through multiple coaching staffs where they have this problem. So I don't really know. I know that their roster tends to lack depth. It has some really nice players in key positions, but there's not a lot of stuff behind them, which is kind of what Seattle's roster looks like this year, but that's a different story.
I will say this, that Monty Austinfort is shown, at least initially, over the last 2 seasons that he's a pretty decent general manager, and they had a
Yes.
lot of draft capital. They had a lot of free
Hmm.
agent money to spend with the cap, and so it's gotten better for them depth wise. They've got some nice depth pieces, but not the entire roster. Like there are
Yeah.
definitely some position group holes. Um, and again, for me, it's Kyler Murray. I think that over and over, year after year, it's just been proven that he's just not the guy that's going to get him over the hump. And they paid him, and they're kind of sitting now with him. And I think until that really changes, this is a team that's going to be viewed, I think, as a fourth place team in this division. But I do like the direction, and it reminds me a little bit of the Cleveland Browns roster from about 4 or 5 years ago. They just continued to build talent and talent and talent, but they can never really get to the playoffs, even though they had one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. In the end, it
Because they
just
didn't have
didn't
a
work
quarterback.
altogether, and they didn't have a really good coach. I like Jonathan Gannon. I mean, he's a nice
Yeah.
coach, defensive minded guy, and I think they'll have him playing well. Again, there were 8 wins last year. I could see them winning 10 pretty easily. They could finish, I think, in third place in this division, depending on what the Rams do. I think the 49ers could very well end up being fourth, but until that actually happens, I'm going to put the
Mhm.
Cardinals there.
Yeah. So looking at their draft, we kind of already mentioned it, but I liked the first 4 picks. Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle, is going to be a nice piece for them up front. Will Johnson,
I
who's a
agree.
cornerback, is a guy that you and I both, I think, mocked to Seattle in round 2 if he had dropped to 50. Um, he
Tall,
didn't. He got
physical
taken
guy with
47.
decent ball skills and just a little bit of injury
Mhm.
stuff that kind of pushed him down a little bit.
Yeah, and then they got an edge rusher, Jordan Birch, which you can always have more pass rushers, and then Cody Simon, the off the ball linebacker, who is another guy that I like,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in that defense. So, and I guess you mentioned Denzel Burke in the 5th round. I don't think he's going
Yeah,
to be
I like
ready
him.
to come in and make a an instant like impact, but I think there's definitely special teams potential there, and
Agreed.
eventually growing into a more prominent role. They had a nice draft. That's a good group of guys.
That is a
And they
good
had a
group.
couple, yeah, had a couple of projects later in the draft, but that group of 5 is a solid draft, and um, that's adding talent. Where I think they run into a thing is, did they actually improve? When you go through and you look at free agency, um, Calais Campbell would have been a tremendous signing a decade ago, but the dude's
Yeah.
39. When he
Yeah.
signed, I thought it was going to be a sign and retire situation. I didn't realize that they were signing him to keep playing.
Well,
Um,
the nice thing about that is he's still a solid run defender and a solid player. He shows up, he's just a workhorse. And then they've got Walter Nolan, and
mhm,
LJ Collier. As they work Nolan into the equation, Calais Campbell will have, probably 50-60% of the snaps initially. But if they could get him to where he's only playing, 20-25 snaps a game, and he's in that rotation and he can stay fresh, he can impact games still, I think, especially at the end of games. So it's a wait and see for me as how all of this kind of comes together, but they continue to really make decent moves. They got Josh Sweat as well. And I think that their defense is going to be a little better than it was last year, especially on the defensive line. They really struggled, I think, last year, and that will help them. Will Johnson will help on the back end too. Buda
yeah, but
Baker's still
losing
there, and they've
Naquan
got some other
Jones is going
pieces.
to hurt. Losing
Yeah.
Naquan Jones
Yes.
is going to hurt. Um,
Yep.
losing Kairos Tonga. I mean, he was more than just a rotational piece last year when he was healthy. They lost some talent, and I don't know if I mean, I like Nolan as a replacement for one of those two guys, but Campbell's 39. And I don't know if that's a replacement that actually shows up as being an improvement for them. Um, Royce Newman on the
Yeah.
offensive line was a nice pickup, but they lost some players there too. And so there's a lot of treading water overall with this roster. To me, I don't know if they got better. And so they were an 8-win
Well, they're
team
running the
last
same
year.
players back on offense. I mean, the offensive starters, are going to be the same, pretty much at almost every position. And then, the depth stuff is just okay. I mean, the wide receiver room, I would be concerned after the top three. You don't have a lot there, and there's not a lot behind them. So, yeah.
Yeah.
They'll be okay. But again, I think this is kind of a middling team still. Middling roster, middling team until proven otherwise. I see them potentially winning 10 games. They've got as everyone in the NFC West has, a decent schedule when they play all those AFC teams. So I could see them getting to 10 wins, but this division is going to be pretty tough.
It is going to be tough. And so getting the 10 wins, okay, but that's, an easy schedule. How many does that get them into the playoffs? It didn't for Seattle last year.
If they finish third, there's a chance. I will say that this is one of the divisions where you could have 3 teams out of this division be in the playoffs. And they could sneak in, like as a wild card 7th seed. But they need to get at least to 10 wins to do that and finish third. I think there is a scenario in this division where 10 wins gets you third place and potentially a playoff seeding. So let's talk about San Francisco, because this is the other team, I think, Keith, that a lot of people are considering as the first or second ball club in this division as far as seeding. And I don't see it. I still see them as being the third place team, maybe over the Cardinals, just because they do have a decent roster still, even though it is diminished. They have a lot of playmakers. They have a lot of skill positions. I thought they drafted really well, depending on how those draft picks kind of come along and ready to go this season. They could have, again, they could be a 10-win team, I think. So they traded Deebo Samuel. They released Hargrave for cap reasons. They lost Shavarius Ward and their safety Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw in free agency. That's a lot of talent to walk out the door. They did pay Brock Purdy, though. I mean, all that talent went out the door so they could pay Brock Purdy.
And they also, left Aaron Banks, their starting left guard.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and they really don't have any quarterback depth after Purdy. I mean, they got Mac Jones. That's it. They're really, their only key signing was the tight end Luke Farrell, which is, kind of more of a blocking guy to help their running game out a little bit. I'm not sure. I mean, and they're getting older. This is an older roster. You'd mentioned the other day that you thought the Rams were one of the oldest rosters in the NFL. This roster is getting old. Like Kittle's 31 now. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey's older. Trent Williams, obviously, and so it's just one of those deals. So, talk to me about, before we get to their draft picks, how did you feel about what they did in free agency, the signing of Brock Purdy, and where the roster kind of stands before they added their draft class?
Well, they had to pay Brock Purdy because that's just the nature of the NFL right now. You can't win without a quarterback. They had a quarterback, and even if he's not an elite quarterback compared to the others, he's good enough to get them to where they need to go. They just have to get the roster around him better. But other than that, there was just so much talent that's just leaving, and not a lot coming back because they had to get out from underneath. Where they were just kind of buried in terms of caps, space and or lack of and that kind of stuff. But there's just so much talent that left. The idea that this team, which won 6 games last year, got better and was going to be a 12-win team this year, while losing all that
How
talent.
many games were they favored in?
15 out of 17.
15 out of 17.
Yeah, they're
While
favored
the
to win in
Seahawks are
15 out
favored
of
in
17.
7 games.
Yep.
That's crazy.
It's
Okay.
crazy, and you just go through and you look at the talent coming in versus the talent going out in free agency, and there's a lot of going out. There's very little coming back. A lot of re-signed guys. It was, they got Kittle re-signed, they got Purdy re-signed, they cut Kyle Juszczyk and then got him back on a very team friendly deal. These are good players. Very good players in some cases, but overall, like, there isn't improvement in the roster in this. There's a lot of talent leaving, and in no place is it more um, evident than like skill position players, right? Wide receiver. To lose Deebo Samuel and everything that he does, and the only thing that they brought in to replace him was Demarcus Robinson, who's going to be 31 and has been steady but not great at any point in his career. That's a drop off that hurts. And then you look at at running back, like
They're
they're
really counting
currently.
on like Ricky Parasol to really step up.
Yeah. So they're looking at a running back. They're looking at Christian McCaffrey's got to stay healthy. After that, they've got Isaac Garenda, who I like a lot, and
I do too.
then there's not depth there. And that's
And the
kind of just,
rookie Jordan James from Oregon. That was it.
yeah. The There's not a lot for Brock Purdy to work with outside of, Kittle, Ayuk, and McCaffrey, which that's a great trio of, tight end, wide receiver, and running back. But you got to have more than just 3 guys on the field as weapons. I just don't see it looking at this roster.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I like Mikael Williams, who they drafted, Alfred Collins, to plug up the run a little bit. CJ West is another player that we talked about quite a bit as being a guy that could play tackle for them. Nick Martin, you'd mentioned, and then after that, that's about it. A couple guys on offense, and Upton Stout, I liked a little bit at corner.
yep.
He's going to start out, backing up.
The Seahawks went
But
heavy
he's kind
offense
of
in
more
the
of a
draft,
nickel
and
guy.
the 49ers did the opposite. They went heavy defense. First round pick, edge. Second round pick, defensive tackle. Third round pick, linebacker. Fourth round pick, cornerback. Or sorry, it was a fourth pick, but in the third round, it's cornerback. Fourth round pick, defensive tackle. Yeah, they went fifth round pick, safety. Like they went heavy defense. In order to try and shore that up. I just don't see the offense. I have a hard time seeing this team being competent offensively. I mean, like I said, they've got a lot of high end talent, but there's nothing behind them. And Christian McCaffrey is a guy that his entire career has struggled to stay healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And Brandon Ayuk has been injured. And we'll kind of see how he rebounds a little bit. Yeah, no, I agree. I think, the 49ers to me are the third best team in this division. And I don't see them as being everything that everyone else is seeing out there. It's kind of a weird offseason, Keith, because normally I
don't know what they're looking at.
You see alignment in like I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about the Rams, because this is the team, right? This is the team that year in, year out seems to have all of the favor of ESPN and the NFL network and so on and so forth. And I get it. Their coach is amazing. He gets them ready to play. And they always seem to be competitive, and more competitive than I would have given them credit for even last year and the year before. I thought, well, this is kind of a 7-win team. I'm not seeing it. And they came out and they won, and they ended up going to the Super Bowl. And then they regressed. They lost a lot of players. They had some retirements along their defensive line. They continued to play better than I thought they would. And last year they finished with 10 wins, but man, they were amazing down the stretch. Like, they started the season terribly, not being very good. And I thought for sure our predictions were going to be true with them, that they were going to be way overrated, and they came on, and hats off to them. But how do you feel about them this year, Keith?
I would say a lot of what happened last year was their defense was pathetically bad at the beginning of the year, but they relied on a lot of rookies. There was a lot of really young talent on that defense that slowly came on as the season progressed. And guys like Jared Verse, who were just, kind of lost at the beginning of the year, he was a dominant force at the end of the year. And that's the kind of stuff, Cam Kitchens,
defensive
same
rookie
way.
of the year.
Yeah, Cam Kitchens is very similar. He was a guy that did not look good at the beginning of the year, really struggled, and then, but down the stretch, he looked great, outstanding. So there's a lot of that on that roster last year. It's a really young defense, and I think overall, like, I don't know if they're going anywhere, because that young defense is still there, and it's only going to get better with, more experience.
Yeah. So I agree with everything you just said. Matthew Stafford's 1 year older. I think he's going to be 37 this year. Everyone seems to think that that's the key to their season and their offense. And I'm not sure if I would rely on a 37-year-old guy now. He can still wing it, but he's shown the last few years that he's been susceptible to injury. Behind that, they've got Jimmy Garoppolo. We know the limitations there, although he can run Sean McVay's offense, I have no doubt. And they got Devontae Adams. I think, we saw the best of what Devontae Adams was probably 3 years ago at this point. And so we'll see there. They still have Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, fantastic, who's never really completely. He's good, but he's never really completely broken out. So this year could be his year. And then they've got Kyron Williams and Blake Corum to run the ball.
And then if you look at players they've lost, like Cooper Kupp came to Seattle. Puka Nacua kind of took over as the number one last year when Kupp was hurt. But that doesn't mean he wasn't a huge part of everything they did. Demarcus Robinson left to go join the 49ers. Like I said, he's been steady, but not tremendous. There's a bunch of, there's always a lot of like guys that are like fringe that come and go. But Michael Holt, the edge player, is gone. He went to the Bills. Christian Rosebloom the linebacker went to the Panthers. And then Jeff Notebloom, their left tackle, left as well, although he was hurt and only played 20% of the snaps last year. So um, yeah, they lost some stuff. They also got some guys back. They got other players. They did a good job signing. Devontae Adams is a guy that I think he's seriously on the decline, but a declining Devontae Adams is still better than a lot of receivers in the NFL. Poona Ford's coming in to be their nose tackle. We know him very well in Seattle. He's a guy that can really play and make some things happen. And even a guy like Nate Landman, the linebacker.
I have to say their defensive line is yeah. I like their defensive line, not quite as well as I like the potential for Seattle's line, but this is a decent defensive line with Braden Fisk, Poona Ford, Kobe Turner, Byron Young. Then you add Ty Hamilton out of the draft, Josiah Stewart out of the draft. Terrence Ferguson on the other side of the ball at tight end. I didn't think that they drafted particularly well. They didn't have a lot of draft picks. I mean, their first pick was the 46th overall pick. They picked up a first rounder next year, though, which could be very, very good for them. But I think they added some depth in the draft, but no real starters that you can just plug and play. And that's where I think the differences are between like Seattle and LA. To me, Seattle's an ascending roster, up and coming, oozing with potential, have some dynamic playmaking ability on both sides of the ball. And I'm just not sure I see that with the Rams. Like, I think the Rams can eke out some wins. I think they're, if you really take a look at the balance, the way they're balanced, I would say their points scored versus points allowed are going to be fairly close. Like, this isn't a team that's going to be explosive and score a ton of points. They're going to try to play some defense with you and give their offense a few extra chances in a game. But Keith, help me out here. Help me understand how the Rams are favored so much. In fact, there were a couple of instances where I think I saw the Rams like in a top 5 situation in all of the NFL, not just in the NFC. I don't know. Is that all on Matthew Stafford?
I mean, there is a lot of it's a matter of they won the division last year. They did so winning 9 of their last 10 or 8 of their last 9 to take the division. So that run is kind of what people are looking at and look progressing that forward, because all those young guys are just going to be better. They didn't lose a lot of talent that they didn't replace. And yeah, it's Matthew Stafford is a guy that is going to make other people on that offense look a lot better than we might think they are roster-wise. So, and the defense was good down the stretch last year. I like what the Rams have, but man, they're on offense old. They're very old on offense, and that's never a good sign, because that's when older players get hurt more. And I'd be really concerned about that if I was a Rams fan. But on defense, they're really young. And so hopefully they can basically do what Seattle's trying to do, and that is dominate the game defensively and hope the offense does enough. And the fact that they've got Matthew Stafford, that's a lot easier to do enough when you got a guy like that.
True. So, let's talk about just Seattle a little bit in the context of the rest of this conversation. So we've talked about the improvements, the changes, how we feel about each of those teams. It's hard for me to get excited about those teams, just kind of as a neutral outside observer. Like, I've been around football a long time. It's like, if I'm going to be able to give the Rams credit for something or whatever, I don't have any problem with that. or the 49ers or the Cardinals. I'm just not seeing it. And until it really, I mean, the Rams won the division with 10 wins last year. Like, help me understand how they improved their roster enough to win 11 games this year, or 10, or get back to 10.
Well, they have an easier schedule because they're playing the South, AFC and NFC, which is going to give them more wins. And as far as improving the roster, I mean, people are looking at, Cooper Kupp's on the decline, and they traded him out for Devontae Adams, and people see that as an upgrade, even though I'm not sure Devontae Adams has enough in the tank for me to just buy in that that's a major upgrade. There's a lot of that, but a lot of it I think has to do with they were 10 wins because they were awful at the beginning of the year, but then once they got some guys healthy on offense and those defensive players turned the corner and became good, they became a really good team. And now they're looking at, okay, those defensive players that were really young last year that anchored that team down the stretch during that winning streak, they're the guys that are going to lead this team now, and they're going to be good from the beginning. And I just think that they're looking at maturation of defensive players is going to turn them into a better team overall. And they're just hoping that the offense can, hold on and keep doing well. And when you've got Matthew Stafford, it's easier to do that.
True. Okay. So your honest assessment of how the Seahawks roster overall kind of stacks up against this division. When you talk about trading Geno Smith out, when you lose DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett off your offensive side of the ball, and you then add back in Sam Darnold, Sam Howell was gone. We got we got a replacement there, Drew Lock, and that's all fine. Drafted Jalen Milroe, which probably won't have a huge impact this year, but we'll find out. I do like Scantling, but he's a guy that's going to give you at most like 45 receptions for 600-700 yards and a few touchdowns. To me, there's really no replacing DK Metcalf, and we didn't even really try to. There's a couple of field stretching kind of wide receivers there, but the physical player that DK is, we're not going to have that on the roster this year, which is fine. We've got some decent receivers though. Signed DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side of the ball, re-signed Ernest Jones and Jerron Reed, and I thought we had a great draft. So did we do enough, Keith, with a easier schedule, a similar quarterback that had similar statistics as Geno, even a little better, especially the touchdown to interception ratio, and our draft picks? Did that improve us more than 10 wins to get us in the conversation to be able to compete for the division title?
See, I think it does. And I know that it's easy to be a homer and say that, this is a better team and whatever, and not be as objective as I think we need to be. But I look at this team, this roster. They won 10 games last year. And like I said, easier schedule, true for everybody. But what did they do roster wise? Well, they brought everybody back on defense. And that was, the key thing, because down the stretch, the last like 10 games, 9 games, that defense was legit good. Top 5 in like every category. So they brought everybody back, all the starters, and then replaced Dre Jones with DeMarcus Lawrence. DeMarcus Lawrence is on the downside of his career, but Dre Jones wasn't good. Certainly wasn't living up to his salary. And so that that one's kind of a wash. Add Nick and Amari to give them more, explosiveness and stuff at the back
Yeah.
end. And I just think overall that defense is going to continue to be legit. And it's a matter of, okay, can the offense do enough? Now, last year they won 10 games, but the offense was terrible. And it was terrible for a couple of reasons. One was the offensive line, and two was Geno Smith throwing interceptions. And three was the lack of a running game because it was so poorly coordinated by Ryan Grubb and company. So they switched out the scheme and brought in someone who actually knows what they're doing, coordinating an NFL offense. They swept at a guy, they went from Geno Smith. They traded him and brought in Darnold, which I think is kind of a lateral move. Some people are saying it's an improvement. Some people are saying it's a decline. I think it's really lateral. And so whatever, that matters. They lost DK Metcalf, and that's really easy to look at and be like, well, the team's on decline because how do you replace that? They lost Tyler Lockett, and he's been, tremendous in Seattle for the last decade. But I think that also looks at Tyler Lockett and recognizes what he was, not what he currently is, because he's on the downside of his career. And we've watched his production drop in each of the last 3 years, even as the Seahawks have gone to a much more pass happy, format. His numbers continue to drop. And so replacing him isn't as hard as I think some people would want to believe. Just it's an age thing. Sorry. And so overall, they improved the offensive line with Gray Zabel, which was absolutely needed, and getting Abe Lucas healthy on the right side. So those two things alone should add and make the offensive line better. A competent scheme should make the running game better. And okay, they lost DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but they added Cooper Kupp and Vantis Scotling and Torrey Horton. And yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of lateral movement overall, I think, except for Great Zabel, who I think is going to be a major improvement. But on offense, there's a lot of like, okay, we're kind of the same thing, only a competent coaching staff now, which they didn't have last year. And people aren't recognizing that that's going to be a difference maker in the positive for the Seahawks. And then on the defensive side, they were already legit, and they're not going to be any less legit this year. There's a lot of misconception about Seattle. I really think
Right.
that people aren't seeing that this team is going to be good.
Yeah. No, I mean, we are counting on a bunch of factors that are new this year, where we are giving them, the weight of being positive rather than negative. For example, Cooper Kupp, we're giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to stay healthy and have an impact on the roster and be a good fit for this scheme. Scatling worked with our offensive coordinator in New Orleans. And so there's some familiarity there. So we're kind of counting on that to be easily integrated, but he hasn't worked with Sam Darnold yet. They still need to build that rapport. Jackson Smith and Jigba, how does he do in this scheme, especially when paired with Cooper Kupp? Both of them like to operate out of the slot. We'll see how that works. I agree with you on the offensive line. Charles Cross, Gray Zabel, Oluwatimi, Christian Haynes, Abraham Lucan is a nice starting five to me. You've got a couple of nice backups in there as well with Lumeo, who's got some nice playing time experience. Jalen Sundell, who the team is really high on. And
Josh
we
Jones,
didn't mention,
who they brought in to be the swing
Torrey
tackle.
Horton, I think is going to end up being Yeah. So the offensive line is going to be good. I like the addition of Torrey Horton and Elijah Arroyo and Jalen Milroe as weapons on the offense to be able to add to the mix. And then Walker, Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh, but then you add Damian Martinez to that room as well. I think that's an upgrade And on the defensive side, you mentioned it. All the starters are back, plus DeMarcus Lawrence. Then you add Hankins back in. Derek Hall and Boye Mafe aren't even listed on the depth chart as starters. That's how deep we are at those positions. So that brings a really nice depth chart. Nick Emanwari as well as part of that rotation, and the the defensive back room is, I would say, the weakest part of the defense currently. But I think we're one signing away from having that be a strength, like with Rasul Douglas, for example.
I'd say the
And
off the
so
ball
I really
linebacker.
like the defense. I think it's going to be a top 5 defense.
Yeah, so off the ball linebacker, just like if Jones goes down, the team's going to hurt a lot, and so that's kind of my big concern, more so than defensive back. But yeah, I mean, I just look at this, I'm like, the defense is going to be legit good. The offense has to do enough, which that's the same thing we just said about the Rams. I like Seattle's weapons.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap this thing up. Any final thoughts on any one of those teams that we talked about, as far as what your expectations are?
I'm just going to say I just don't see the hype on the 49ers this year. I don't understand it with all the talent that left and none of it was replaced. How can they possibly win twice as many games as a year ago? I just don't see how they improved. And to me, that's the biggest thing that jumps out when I look at expectations versus rosters.
So we are going to get into a kind of a deep into the off-season look at the position groups on the Seahawks. Dive into each position group per show, so we'll really be able to take a deep dive. The next couple of shows coming up, I've got us ranking the top 5 offensive players and defensive players on the Seahawks roster, and then we'll get into the position group stuff. You're going to be taken off for a fun little getaway in about 3 weeks.
For a week.
And maybe I'll have some guests on to fill that gap. Yep. Which puts us at our annual question and answer show a little late this year. Usually we have that right around the 1st of July, or right around the 4th. And this year I've got it scheduled for us to on the 8th of July this year. So, but I hope you have a great time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I haven't truly gotten away since we opened the vet clinic, and this will be the first chance for my wife and I to really get away from here and take a break, and it'll be really nice.
Yeah.
Going to Hawaii, gonna sit on the beach and drink some Mai Tais and enjoy ourselves.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds great. All right, let's get out of here, Keith. Thanks for the conversation. Really enjoyed that. You can find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk, the show Seahawks Playbook podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. And when you do, leave us a comment, like the show, subscribe, share it with your friends and family, all that good stuff. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.